Now that we've looked at the general characteristics of arthropods, we're going to look at one of the major subphylums of arthropods called Crustacea. And Crustacea is probably the most well-known type of marine arthropods. These are going to be things like shrimp and crabs and copepods and barnacles and things that you've probably heard of before. So they are the most common type and well-known of the arthropods in the ocean. The term Crustacea has a very specific meaning. Crust is the rind or crust or the hard outer covering, which this class or subphylum is known for. So if you've ever eaten crab and you've tried to crack through the shell of a crab, what you're actually cracking through is that crust or that hard outer covering, or their exoskeleton is actually what it is. So they get the name Crustacea from having this hard outer covering. The specific characteristics of this class or subphylum are they have two pairs of antennae, so not just one, but two pairs of antennae, and their head and their thorax are joined to form this body segment that we call the cephalothorax, cephala meaning head and then the thorax. So they have the head and the thorax joined to form the cephalothorax. And then the feeding in the subphylum, there's going to be all different sorts of feeding methods represented. You're going to have filter feeders, you're going to have carnivores, you're going to have scavengers, detritivores, you're going to have all different kinds of feeding types represented. So Crustacea, again, is the most common name for mostly aquatic arthropod invertebrates, including things like the lobster and the crab. They are considered to be the insects of the ocean because they are so common and they're found everywhere. So they're very, very common in the ocean. And actually, most of the animals that are alive in the world are marine crustaceans, actually types of copepods, which are in the crustacean subphylum. So most of the animals in the world actually fall into this subphylum, which is kind of crazy. You do have some types of crustaceans that will be found on land, things like sow-bugs, like roly-polies, and you also find a few types of crustaceans in freshwater, but for the most part they are marine, so found in the ocean. Most crustaceans are pretty small. They're like the copepods, which are microscopic, but you can have some types of crustaceans that will get larger. So lobsters, which can be up to 2 feet long, and then the largest of the arthropods, the spider crab, which can have a leg span of 12 feet. So pretty crazy how large that spider crab can get. This subphylum contains about 35,000 known species. So the characteristics of this subphylum, they're going to have a very hard exoskeleton, that hard crust. What they have is actually a exoskeleton that's made out of chitin, and then they also fortify that exoskeleton with calcium, which makes it stronger and harder, which gives it that hard outer crust. Their head will have two pairs of two compound eyes, and then 2 pairs of antennae, and then they will typically have 3 pairs of mouth parts, which they will use to pull food into their mouth. They're also going to have green glands, which are a special organ that excrete wastes for the crustaceans, and those are found near the base of their antenna. And then if you look on the abdominal segment of the crustacean, you're going to find these little things called swimmerets, and they're the swimming legs of the crustaceans. They do also have separate sexes, so you have boy crabs and girl crabs, and typically you find when they reproduce, the females will have the eggs attached to their swimmerets, and that's where they're going to carry the eggs and protect the eggs. And then the males will have the first pair of their swimmerets will be modified, calcified, in order to copulate with the female and pass the sperm over to the female. If you look at the tail of a crustacean, their tail is going to be fan-shaped, and it's composed of 2 parts. It's going to have the uropods and a telson, which when you do your crayfish dissection, you'll see those. And then the circulatory system is going to be open. It's going to have an open circulatory system. There's not really a heart. I mean, there is a heart, but the heart has holes in it, and it just kind of moves the fluid around into the different sinuses or spaces, and it does not flow in a closed loop. The nervous system is going to have a ventral nerve cord, so a nerve cord that runs down the back, and then also a ganglia system, so gathering of nerve cell bodies. It's very similar to that of an earthworm. Here's a picture of a crustacean. So you can see down here, this is where you're going to find the telson and the uropods. This section right here, this is going to be the cephalothorax, where the head and the thorax are joined. And then down here, this is going to be your abdominal segment, and you can see the little swimmerets underneath the abdominal segments. You can also see the two pairs of antennae up here, and the mouth, which is actually located down here. And then you can see a picture of the internal organs of the crustacean as well. So they do have an external skeleton and a segmented body. And you have different types of things like limbs that are on each of these segments that are used for respiration or swimming or crawling or feeding. And then you'll have the extended abdominal cavity on the inside that will contain the digestive system. Here's a picture of a breakdown of the exoskeleton of a crayfish, which is our model crustacean. So you can see the different parts of the exoskeleton, that hard outer covering. For reproduction, you're going to have separate sexes, so male and female. But you do have some types of parasitic crustaceans, and then also barnacles, which will have like a hard time finding a mate, so they will be simultaneous hermaphrodites, meaning they're male and female at the same time. That basically increases the number of possible partners that they can reproduce with, and if necessary, they can actually do self-fertilization as a very, very last resort. So if they have to reproduce and they can't find a mate, then they can use self-fertilization. You do have some types of crustaceans that can actually switch gender as they get older. So they can go from male to female, like female to male. And you may also see some types of crustaceans that will exhibit very elaborate courtship behavior, meaning they will, males will dance for the females. Sometimes the males may even fight for a chance to mate with the females. So you'll see all sorts of different kinds of mating behavior. Once the eggs are fertilized, the mom typically will keep the baby or the fertilized eggs on her swimmerets until they reach a larval stage or post-larval stage, and then they'll be released into the open water. Once they get into the open water, they'll pass through several larval stages that probably won't look anything like the adult form. And once they pass through these larval phases, once they reach a certain size, they will probably settle down onto the bottom if they're a larger type of crustacean and develop and go through several molting stages in order to grow to be larger. Typically, crustaceans don't form very well organized societies. They're fairly solitary. And in general, the small crustaceans like copepods and things like that will only live for a few days, but some of the larger ones may live for decades. So lobster can live for many, many years. This picture is just to show you some of the different kinds of crustaceans that you can find. So you can see a picture of the krill, of the shrimp and prawns, lobster, crabs, crayfish, and barnacles.